Detective Sarah Martinez was finishing her second cup of lukewarm coffee when her radio crackled to life at 4:17 p.m. on that sweltering Phoenix afternoon. The dispatcher's voice was tight with urgency. "All units, we have a code Adam at 2847 Desert Rose Drive. 3-year-old Hispanic female, Emma Rodriguez, missing approximately 30 minutes. Last seen wearing pink shorts and a white unicorn t-shirt." Sarah's stomach dropped. 23 years on the force had taught her that missing children cases were either resolved quickly or became every parent's worst nightmare. She grabbed her keys and badge, her mind already racing through protocols as she sprinted toward her patrol car. The address was only 12 minutes away, but in child abduction cases, every second felt like an eternity. The Rodriguez home sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood where kids still played in front yards and neighbors knew each other's names. As Sarah pulled up, she was struck by the chaos erupting from what should have been a peaceful Sunday family gathering. Cars were parked haphazardly across lawns. People were running in different directions, and the sound of frantic Spanish mixed with English created a symphony of desperation. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's mother, was pacing the driveway. Like a caged animal, her hands shaking as she clutched her cell phone. Carlos, Emma's father, was organizing male relatives into search groups, his voice hoarse from shouting instructions. But it was the grandmother, Rosa Mendoza, who caught Sarah's immediate attention. The elderly woman sat motionless on the porch. Steps, staring at the backyard swing set where Emma's favorite teddy bear, a worn brown creature named Mr. Buttons, lay abandoned in the dirt. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Sarah approached Maria with practiced calm. "I'm Detective Martinez. I need you to tell me exactly what happened." Maria's words tumbled out in a breathless rush. She was playing right there on the swings with her cousins. "We were preparing food for the barbecue. Rosa was watching the kids while we were in the kitchen. When we came out to check on them, Emma was gone. Just gone. The other children said they didn't see anything. They were playing hide and seek. And when they went to find Emma for the next round, she wasn't there." Sarah knelt down to Rosa's eye level. The grandmother's face was etched with guilt so profound it was painful to witness. "Senora, I know this is hard, but I need to understand the timeline. When did you last see Emma?" Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. "I was sitting right here, watching them play." Emma was laughing such a beautiful laugh, Detective. She was, pushing herself on the swing, trying to go higher like her older cousin Miguel. "I went inside for maybe 5 minutes to get them juice boxes. When I came back," she gestured helplessly at the empty swing, still moving slightly in the desert breeze. Sarah's trained eye swept the backyard, looking for anything unusual. The property was fenced, but the gate leading to the alley was standing open. Who had access to this gate today? Carlos joined the conversation, his face pale with terror. Everyone parks in the alley during family gatherings. Cousins, uncles, family friends, maybe 20 people came and went today. We always leave the gate open so people can come through the backyard. Sarah felt her heart sink. Multiple entry and exit points, dozens of potential witnesses who might not have noticed anything suspicious, and a 30-minute head start for whoever had taken Emma. She radioed for additional units and requested the canine team immediately. Within minutes, the quiet neighborhood transformed into a command center. Police cars lined the street, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows in the late afternoon sun. Officers began the methodical process of interviewing every family member, neighbor, and potential witness. Sarah coordinated with dispatch to issue an immediate Amber Alert, knowing that Emma's photograph would soon appear on highway signs, television screens, and cell phones across Arizona. Detective Mike Chun, Sarah's partner, arrived with Rex, a German shepherd trained in search and rescue operations. Rex immediately picked up Emma's scent from her teddy bear, leading them through the backyard gate into the alley. The dog's nose worked frantically along the dusty ground, following an invisible trail that only he could detect. "He's got something," Mike reported as Rex pulled them toward the street. The dog's intensity was focused and determined, his training kicking in as he followed Emma's scent trail across the asphalt and onto the sidewalk. But after 50 yards, Rex stopped abruptly, circling in confusion. The trail had gone cold at the curb. Sarah's blood ran cold as she stared at the spot where Rex had lost the scent. "Vehicle," she said grimly. "Someone put her in a car right here." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood, Sarah watched Emma's extended family cling to each other in the growing darkness. The Amber Alert had gone live, Emma's cherubic face now broadcast across the state. Her dark curls and bright smile looked out from every screen, accompanied by the urgent plea, "If you see this child, call 911 immediately." The first crucial hours were slipping away. Sarah knew the statistics by heart. Most abducted children who are killed die within the first 3 hours of their disappearance. As she coordinated with FBI agents who were rushing to the scene, she couldn't shake the image of that empty swing still moving in the breeze, a haunting reminder of the innocent child who had vanished without a trace. Maria Rodriguez collapsed into her husband's arms, her sobs echoing through the neighborhood as darkness fell over Phoenix. Somewhere out there, 3-year-old Emma was alone and terrified, and Sarah Martinez had made a silent promise that she would not rest until she brought that little girl home, no matter what it took. Hour 16. Detective Sarah Martinez stared at the wall of missing child posters that had transformed the Phoenix Police Department's conference room into a shrine of desperate hope. Emma Rodriguez's face gazed back at her from dozens of flyers, her innocent smile now seared into the consciousness of an entire city. The Amber Alert had triggered a response unlike anything Sarah had witnessed in her career within 12 hours. Emma's photograph had been shared over 100,000 times on social media, and the tip line was receiving calls every 30 seconds. The command center buzzed with controlled chaos. FBI agent Patricia Hayes had arrived from Quantico with a team of specialists, their laptop screens glowing with databases of registered sex offenders, recent parolees, and known child predators within a 200-mile radius of Phoenix. Sarah rubbed her bloodshot eyes, having caught only 2 hours of sleep on the office couch. She'd been running on pure adrenaline and black coffee since Emma's disappearance, driven by the haunting image of that empty swing and the desperate faces of the Rodriguez family. "We've got teams covering a 15-mile radius," Agent Hayes reported, her voice crisp despite the early hour. "Arizona Department of Public Safety has mobilized every available helicopter, and Border Patrol is monitoring all checkpoints between here and Mexico. If someone's trying to transport Emma across state lines, we'll catch them." But Sarah knew the statistics. After the first 24 hours, the probability of finding a missing child alive dropped dramatically. They were now entering the critical second day, and leads were coming in faster than they could be processed. Well-meaning citizens reported seeing Emma everywhere at gas stations in Tucson, shopping centers in Flagstaff, even as far away as Las Vegas. Each false alarm felt like a punch to the gut. Outside the police station, the media circus had exploded into a 3-ring spectacle. News vans from CNN, Fox, and local stations lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking sunlight. Reporter Jessica Walsh from Channel 12 had been broadcasting live updates every hour, her perfectly styled blonde hair and immaculate makeup a stark contrast to the grief-stricken faces of Emma's family gathered behind her. Maria Rodriguez had become the face of every parent's worst nightmare. She stood at the podium during the morning press conference, her husband's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders, clutching Emma's favorite stuffed unicorn. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. "Please," she whispered into the microphone, her words carrying across the nation through live television feeds. Emma loves ice cream and Disney princesses. She calls her grandmother Abuela Rosa and sings herself to sleep with Twinkle. "Twinkle, little star. She's just a baby. If someone has her, please just bring her home. We won't press charges. We just want our daughter back." Carlos spoke. Next, his carpenter's hands trembling as he gripped the podium. "Mama, if you're watching this, Daddy and Mommy love you so much. We're looking for you, Mia. Be brave for us, okay?" The community response was overwhelming. Volunteer search parties had formed organically throughout the city, with hundreds of people combing through desert terrain, abandoned buildings, construction sites, and every conceivable hiding place. The Walmart parking lot on 35th Avenue had become an unofficial staging area, with tables laden with water bottles, sandwiches, and maps marked with grid search patterns. Sarah found herself drawn to the searchers' determination. She watched as groups of complete strangers, office workers, retirees, college students, construction crews organized themselves into search teams. They carried Emma's photograph like a sacred talisman, showing it to every passerby, every store clerk, every person they encountered. Tommy Gutierrez, a homeless veteran who lived behind a Chevron station on Indian School Road, had been particularly helpful. Despite his weathered appearance and the suspicious glances he received from some volunteers, Tommy knew the streets better than anyone. He'd been walking the alleys and vacant lots since dawn, his keen eyes searching for any sign of disturbance. "I got kids too," Tommy told Sarah when she interviewed him at his makeshift camp. "3 daughters back in California. Haven't seen them in years 'cause of my drinking, but I know what it's like to love a little girl. I ain't gonna stop looking until we find her." Rex, the K-9 officer, had been working tirelessly with his handler, following scent trails that led nowhere. The dog had tracked Emma's smell to multiple locations around the neighborhood, a nearby playground where the family often went, the corner store where Carlos bought Emma candy, even the bus stop 2 blocks away. But each trail ended abruptly, suggesting Emma had been moved by vehicle from various locations over time, possibly during reconnaissance by her abductor. Hour 36 brought a breakthrough that sent Sarah's heart racing. A traffic camera at the intersection of 43rd Avenue and Thunderbird had captured footage of a dark sedan with tinted windows driving erratically around the time Emma disappeared. The license plate was partially obscured, but tech specialists were enhancing the image, hoping to get a clear identification. "We're also analyzing cell phone tower data," Agent Hayes explained during the evening briefing. "Every phone that pinged towers in the Rodriguez neighborhood between 4 o'clock and 5 p.m. is being investigated. It's a massive undertaking, but we're looking for patterns, someone who was in that area and then moved quickly away from Phoenix." As the second night fell over the city, search teams reluctantly called off their efforts until dawn. Floodlights had been set up around key search areas, but the desert terrain was treacherous in darkness. Sarah stood in the parking lot of Volunteer Center, watching exhausted searchers pack up their supplies with the quiet determination of soldiers regrouping for another battle. The city of Phoenix held its collective breath, united in hope and terror, as somewhere in the darkness, a 3-year-old girl named Emma Rodriguez waited for rescue that might never come. Hour 73. Detective Sarah Martinez was examining enhanced traffic camera footage when her phone buzzed with a text that would change everything. The message came from Tommy Gutierrez, the homeless veteran who had been relentlessly searching the Nev city's forgotten corners. "Detective, need you at Sunrise Storage on 67th Ave ASAP. Found something bad." Sarah's pulse quickened as she grabbed her keys and radio. Tommy had become an unofficial member of their investigation team, his intimate knowledge of Phoenix's underbelly proving invaluable. His weathered face and tattered clothes made people uncomfortable, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of a man who noticed everything others missed. If Tommy said he'd found something, Sarah believed him. The Sunrise storage facility squatted like a concrete fortress in an industrial area where legitimate businesses gave way to pawn shops and abandoned warehouses. Sarah arrived to find Tommy pacing near the facility's entrance, his hands shaking as he lit his third cigarette in 10 minutes. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by barely contained agitation. "I've been watching this place for 2 days," Tommy said, his voice rough with emotion. "Something felt wrong about it, you know. Too quiet. Most storage places got people coming and going all day, but this one, it's like a graveyard." Sarah studied the facility's layout. Rows of identical orange metal doors stretched into the distance, each unit sealed with heavy padlocks. Security cameras mounted on tall poles surveyed the complex, but their positioning seemed more decorative than functional. The manager's office looked abandoned, its windows covered with newspaper and dust. "What specifically caught your attention?" Sarah asked, pulling out her notepad. Tommy pointed to Unit 247, about halfway down the third row. "That unit there. Yesterday morning, I seen a guy coming out of it. Middle-aged white dude, maybe 5'8", brown hair going bald. But here's the thing, he was carrying a trash bag, and something about the way he handled it." Tommy's voice trailed off as he struggled to find words. "Detective, I got 3 daughters. I know what children's clothes look like, even from a distance." Sarah felt ice water flood her veins. "Did you see his face clearly? Could you identify him?" "Better then." "That," Tommy said, producing a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "I followed him to his car and got his license plate. Arizona tag, Echo Delta 7492. Dark blue Honda Civic, maybe 2018 or 2019. Within minutes, Sarah had run the plate through the system. The results made her stomach lurch. The car belonged to Nathan Webb, 34 years old, a registered sex offender with a history of child endangerment charges. His last known address was an apartment complex just 8 miles from the Rodriguez family home. Webb had been released from prison only 6 months earlier after serving 3 years for attempted kidnapping. "Jesus Christ," Sarah whispered, her hands trembling as she called for backup. "We've got him." The response was swift and overwhelming. Within 30 minutes, the storage facility was surrounded by a coordinated task force, including Phoenix PD, SWAT, FBI agents, paramedics, and child advocacy specialists. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as they approached Unit 247 with bolt cutters, knowing that behind that orange metal door might be the answer to every parent's prayers, or their worst nightmare. The lock snapped with a metallic ping that seemed to echo across the desert. Sarah pulled up the rolling door, and the smell hit her immediately, a combination of human waste, fear, and something else she couldn't identify, but that made her gag. Emergency floodlights illuminated the interior, revealing a scene that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The 10 by 12 storage unit had been converted into a makeshift prison cell. Blankets hung from the walls, creating a sense of enclosure. In one corner sat a bucket that served as a makeshift toilet. Empty food. Containers and water bottles were scattered across the floor. But it was the far corner that made Sarah's blood run cold. Emma Rodriguez was curled into a tiny ball behind a cardboard barrier, clutching a dirty stuffed animal that wasn't her beloved Mr. Buttons. Her pink shorts were torn and stained. Her white unicorn t-shirt now gray with dirt. Her dark curls were matted against her head, and her small body trembled with fear rather than recognition when Sarah approached. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, kneeling down and making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. "My name is Sarah. I'm here to take you home to Mommy and Daddy." The little girl's eyes were wide and unfocused, darting around the storage unit like a trapped animal seeking escape. She didn't respond to her name or show any sign of understanding. The trauma specialist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, gently pushed past Sarah and began her assessment with practiced efficiency. Severe dehydration and possible malnutrition, Dr. Martinez reported quietly into her radio. Signs of psychological trauma, consistent with prolonged captivity. We need pediatric emergency response at Phoenix Children's Hospital immediately. Meanwhile, SWAT teams were simultaneously raiding Webb's apartment across town. Sarah received radio updates as Emma was carefully extracted from the storage unit and rushed to the ambulance. Webb had attempted to flee through his apartment building's rear exit, but was tackled in the parking lot after a brief chase. His arrest was violent and chaotic. He fought like a cornered animal while Sarah screamed at him through her radio to reveal if there were other victims. At Phoenix Children's Hospital, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez collapsed against each other when they saw their daughter for the first time in 3 days. Emma didn't recognize them initially, flinching away from their attempts to embrace her. The reunion that should have been joyful was instead heartbreaking. Their vibrant, chattering daughter had been replaced by a silent, terrified shell of herself. Webb's apartment yielded evidence that chilled investigators to their core. Detailed surveillance photos of Emma and her family, taken weeks before the abduction, maps of their neighborhood with the Rodriguez house circled in red ink, and most disturbingly, children's clothing in various sizes, suggesting Emma might not have been his first victim. As dawn broke over Phoenix on Emma's 4th day of captivity, she was finally safe, but the real battle for her recovery was just beginning. 2 weeks after Emma's rescue, Dr. Rachel Kim sat in her child psychology office at Phoenix Children's Hospital, staring at the empty chair where a 3-year-old should be playing with toys and slowly opening up about her traumatic experience. Instead, Emma Rodriguez remained curled in her mother's lap in the corner of the room, her small body rigid with hypervigilance, her dark eyes darting constantly toward the door, as if expecting danger to burst through at any moment. "She hasn't spoken a single word since we brought her home," Maria Rodriguez whispered, her voice hoarse from sleepless nights and constant worry. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands trembled as she gently stroked Emma's matted hair. "Not even Mama or Papa. It's like she's forgotten how to be our little girl." Dr. Kim had treated hundreds of traumatized children throughout her 15-year career, but Emma's case was particularly challenging. The little girl exhibited all the classic symptoms of severe PTSD, selective mutism, violent nightmares that left her screaming in terror, regression to infantile behaviors, like wetting herself, and an extreme startle response to any unexpected sound or movement. What made it worse was that Emma had been developing normally before her abduction. She was a chatty, social child who loved to sing and tell stories. The contrast between who she had been and who she was now was devastating. Carlos Rodriguez sat in the adjacent chair, his large carpenter's hands clenched into fists of helpless frustration. "She won't let me touch her," he said, his voice breaking. "Her own father, and she flinches when I come near. Yesterday, I tried to pick her up to carry her to bed, and she screamed like I was going to hurt her. My own daughter is afraid of me." The family dynamics had been shattered by Emma's trauma. Her older brother Miguel, only 6 years old himself, didn't understand why his little sister wouldn't play with him anymore. He'd built elaborate Lego castles and drawn pictures with crayons, trying desperately to recapture Emma's attention. But she remained lost in her own world of fear and silence. Dr. Kim reviewed her notes from their previous sessions. Emma's behavior suggested she was trapped in a state of constant hyperarousal, her nervous system convinced that danger lurked around every corner. The slightest unexpected noise, a door closing, a phone ringing, even laughter from the hospital hallway would send her diving under furniture or behind her mother's legs. She refused to eat most foods, accepting only crackers and apple juice, as if she'd forgotten that she was safe and food was abundant. The brain trauma from prolonged terror in someone so young can have lasting developmental impacts, Dr. Kim explained gently to the parents. Emma's mind created protective barriers to help her survive her captivity. Now we need to help her understand that those barriers are no longer necessary, but it's going to take time and patience. Sleep had become a battleground in the Rodriguez household. Emma would only drift off if every light in the house was on and both parents were visible in her line of sight. Even then, nightmares would jolt her awake screaming about the dark place and the bad man. Maria had taken indefinite leave from her job at the bank to provide round-the-clock comfort, but she was exhausting herself trying to anticipate Emma's needs. District Attorney James Morrison had been pressuring the family about Emma's potential testimony in the upcoming trial against Nathan Webb. Webb's defense attorney, Margaret Foster, was already arguing that a traumatized 3-year-old couldn't provide reliable testimony. And without Emma's identification, the prosecution's case would rely entirely on circumstantial evidence, the storage unit, the surveillance photos, Webb's presence near the Rodriguez home, while DNA evidence placed Emma in Webb's car and storage unit. His lawyers were claiming he was simply an innocent bystander who had discovered Emma and was planning to return her to authorities. "We need to know if Emma can identify her abductor," Morrison had explained during a tense meeting in Dr. Kim's office. "I understand the family's priority is her healing, but if she can't testify, Webb might walk free. And if he walks free, he could do this to another child." Dr. Kim found herself caught between protecting her young patient and serving justice. Emma's selective mutism wasn't just psychological. It appeared to be her mind's way of ensuring she never had to relive the horror by speaking about it. Every attempt to introduce play therapy techniques that might help her process the trauma was met with complete withdrawal. Emma would shut down entirely, curling into a ball and rocking back and forth until the session ended. The breakthrough came during their 4th week of therapy when Dr. Kim introduced a golden retriever therapy dog named Sunshine. Animal-assisted therapy had shown promising results with traumatized children, and Dr. Kim hoped that a gentle, non-threatening presence might help Emma begin to trust again. When Sunshine padded quietly into the room, Emma's reaction was subtle but significant. For the first time since her rescue, her rigid posture relaxed slightly. She didn't speak, but she extended one small finger to touch Sunshine's soft fur. A dog, trained to work with traumatized children, lay perfectly still, allowing Emma to explore at her own pace. "Doggy," Emma whispered the first word she'd spoken in over a month. The sound was so quiet that Maria wasn't sure she'd heard correctly, but Dr. Kim's encouraging smile confirmed that yes, Emma had finally broken her silence. It was a tiny crack in the wall of trauma, but it represented hope. Dr. Kim immediately documented the breakthrough and began developing a therapy plan centered around animal assistance. If Emma could learn to trust Sunshine, perhaps she could eventually learn to trust the adults who wanted to help her heal. Outside the therapy room, Webb sat in a county jail cell, his trial date approaching rapidly. The question that haunted everyone involved was whether a broken 3-year-old could find the strength to face her monster in court, and whether justice could be served without destroying what remained of Emma's innocence. 6 months after her rescue, Emma Rodriguez sat cross-legged on the soft carpet of Dr. Rachel Kim's therapy room, her small hands buried deep in Sunshine's golden fur. The transformation was subtle, but undeniable. The rigid, terrified child, who had first entered this room, was slowly being replaced by glimpses of the bright little girl she had once been. Her dark eyes, while still cautious, no longer darted constantly toward the door. Her shoulders had relaxed from their perpetual hunch of fear. "Sunshine is a good doggie," Emma whispered, her voice still soft, but growing stronger with each session. These were precious words, carefully chosen and deliberately spoken. Dr. Kim documented every syllable, knowing that each utterance represented a small victory against the trauma that had stolen Emma's voice. Detective Sarah Martinez watched through the one-way mirror, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and determination. She had visited Emma weekly throughout her recovery, building a relationship that transcended the typical cop-victim dynamic. Emma had begun to associate Sarah not with the terrible day of her rescue, but with safety and protection. It was Sarah who had brought Emma her new stuffed unicorn to replace the one lost during her captivity. It was Sarah who sat patiently during therapy sessions, never pushing, never demanding, just being present. "She's starting to ask questions," Dr. Kim reported during their weekly consultation. "Yesterday she wanted to know why some people are bad and others are good. It's a sign that she's beginning to process what happened to her, rather than simply existing in survival mode." District Attorney James Morrison sat at the conference table, his expression grave as he reviewed the timeline approaching Webb's trial. Nathan Webb had been in county jail for 6 months, his defense team filing motion after motion to delay proceedings. His attorney, Margaret Foster, was a formidable opponent who specialized in creating reasonable doubt, and she was already laying the groundwork to challenge Emma's competency as a witness. "We have physical evidence," Morrison said, spreading crime scene photos across the table. Webb's DNA in the storage unit, surveillance footage placing him near the Rodriguez home, the photographs of Emma and her family found in his apartment. But Foster is arguing that all of this is circumstantial. She claims Webb discovered Emma in the storage unit and was planning to return her safely. Sarah felt her jaw clench. "That's ridiculous. The surveillance photos prove premeditation. He stalked that family for weeks before taking Emma." "I agree," Morrison replied. "But without Emma's identification, Foster might convince a jury that Webb is being framed, or that he's simply a good Samaritan who made poor choices. We need Emma to point to Webb and say he's the one who hurt her. That direct identification is the difference between a conviction and Webb walking free." Dr. Kim had been considering an innovative approach to help Emma prepare for the possibility of testifying. Traditional preparation methods showing photographs of the courtroom, explaining legal procedures, were too abstract for a 3-year-old who was still rebuilding her sense of safety in the world. Instead, she proposed something unprecedented: bringing Rex, the K-9 officer who had searched for Emma, into the therapy sessions as a comfort animal. "Rex represents rescue to Emma," Dr. Kim explained to the gathered team. "He was part of the team that found her, that brought her home to safety. If we can help her associate Rex with protection and justice, he might be able to provide the emotional support she needs to face her abductor." The idea was revolutionary. While therapy dogs were commonly used in hospitals and treatment centers, using an active police K-9 as a courtroom comfort animal was largely untested. Rex's handler, Officer Mike Chun, was initially skeptical. "Rex is trained for search and rescue, not therapy," Chun pointed out. "His instincts are to track and apprehend. I'm not sure he can transition to being a calming presence." But when Rex was introduced to Emma during her next therapy session, something magical happened. The German Shepherd, despite his intimidating size and professional training, seemed to understand intuitively that this small human needed gentleness. He lay down beside Emma and allowed her to examine his police vest, his badge, even his collar. Emma traced the word police with her tiny finger, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "Police doggy found Emma," she said quietly, looking up at Dr. Kim with something approaching wonder. It was the longest sentence she had spoken since her rescue, and it carried profound meaning. Emma was beginning to understand that she had been rescued, that good people had fought to bring her home. Over the following weeks, Emma's sessions with both Sunshine and Rex became the foundation of her recovery. She began to distinguish between good and bad with increasing sophistication, understanding that police officers, doctors, and therapists were part of a network of protection that surrounded her. Most importantly, she started to trust her own voice again. "The bad man hurt Emma," she said during one breakthrough session, the words emerging with startling clarity. But Police Doggy and Detective Sarah saved Emma. Dr. Kim felt tears spring to her eyes as she witnessed this crucial moment of cognitive processing. Emma was not only remembering what had happened, she was understanding her role as a survivor rather than a victim. Sarah, watching from behind the mirror, felt a surge of protective determination. Emma was finding her voice, but the question remained whether that fragile voice would be strong enough to speak truth in a courtroom filled with strangers. With Webb sitting just yards away, Morrison began developing a radical courtroom strategy. If Emma could testify with Rex beside her, if the judge would allow such an unprecedented accommodation, they might have a chance. But it would require convincing Judge Patricia Chun that a 3-year-old's testimony, supported by a police dog, could withstand the aggressive cross-examination that Margaret Foster was undoubtedly planning. "We're asking a child to be braver than most adults," Morrison said quietly. "But if she can do it, if she can look at Webb and identify him as her abductor, we can put him away forever." The trial was set to begin in 6 weeks, and Emma Rodriguez, with her newfound voice and her unlikely canine guardians, represented the difference between justice and a predator walking free to hurt another child. Judge Patricia Chun had presided over thousands of cases during her 22 years on the bench, but nothing had prepared her for the unprecedented request sitting on her desk. District Attorney James Morrison was asking permission for a 3-year-old witness to testify with not one, but 2 comfort animals present, Sunshine the therapy dog and Rex the police canine, who had participated in Emma's rescue. Defense attorney Margaret Foster had filed 17 motions objecting to what she called a circus atmosphere designed to prejudice the jury against my client. "Your Honor," Morrison argued during the pre-trial hearing, his voice steady despite the weight of his request. "Emma Rodriguez has made remarkable progress in therapy, but she remains a deeply traumatized child. The presence of these animals doesn't prejudice the jury. It simply allows a victim to tell her truth in an environment where she feels safe enough to speak." Margaret Foster, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, rose from the defense table. Her reputation for dismantling prosecution cases was legendary, and she had already begun planting seeds of doubt about Emma's reliability. "Your Honor, we're talking about a 3-year-old who has spent months in therapy being coached by adults who desperately want a conviction. The very presence of police animals in the courtroom sends a message that the defendant is already guilty. It's prejudicial and inflammatory." Judge Chun studied the psychological evaluations Dr. Rachel Kim had submitted. Emma's progress was documented meticulously, from complete selective mutism to speaking in full sentences, from cowering at sudden noises to playing interactive games with her therapy animals. But the judge also understood Foster's concerns. The case would likely be appealed regardless of the verdict, and any procedural irregularities could overturn a conviction. "I'll allow the therapy dog," Judge Chun ruled after careful deliberation. "But the police canine will remain outside the courtroom during testimony. The jury cannot see an active police animal while a child points to the defendant. However, if the child becomes too distressed to continue, we'll take a recess and allow her comfort team to assist her." Outside the courthouse, Media trucks lined the street like mechanical vultures. CNN, Fox News, Court TV, and dozens of local stations had descended on Phoenix for what they were calling the trial of the decade. Reporter Jessica Walsh from Channel 12 had been covering Emma's story since day one, and her emotional investment in the case was obvious to viewers who had watched her reports evolve from urgent missing child alerts to recovery updates. Today marks the beginning of what legal experts are calling an unprecedented trial. Walsh reported into her microphone, the courthouse steps serving as her backdrop. 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez, who captured the nation's heart during her 6-day disappearance, will attempt to testify against Nathan Webb, the man accused of kidnapping and holding her captive. Legal scholars are watching closely, as this case could set new precedents for child witness testimony and the use of therapy animals in courtrooms. Inside the courthouse, Emma sat in a specially designed witness preparation room with her parents, Dr. Kim, Detective Sarah Martinez, and Sunshine. The room had been painted in soft pastels and furnished with child-sized furniture to make it as non-threatening as possible. Emma wore a new blue dress that her grandmother Rosa had sewn specially for the occasion, complete with tiny unicorn buttons that reminded her of happier times. "Remember, Mia," Maria Rodriguez whispered, kneeling to her daughter's eye level, "you just have to tell the truth about what happened. Detective Sarah and Sunshine will be right there with you, and Mama and Papa will be watching to make sure you're safe." Emma nodded solemnly, her small hand gripping Sunshine's leash. Over the past month, she had practiced answering simple questions in mock trial settings, but everyone knew that the actual courtroom would be far more intimidating. The prosecution team had worked tirelessly to make the experience as child-friendly as possible. They had requested that Emma's testimony occur in the morning when she was most alert, that the courtroom be cleared of unnecessary personnel, and that a special booster seat be installed at the witness stand so she could see over the microphone. Nathan Webb sat at the defendant's table, his appearance dramatically different from the disheveled man who had been arrested 6 months earlier. Foster had insisted he get a haircut, shave regularly, and wear conservative suits to project an image of respectability. At 34, Webb looked like any suburban father, which was precisely the image Foster wanted to present to the jury. She planned to argue that Webb was a troubled man who had made poor choices, but was not the monster the prosecution portrayed him to be. The jury selection had taken 3 days, with both sides carefully vetting potential jurors for bias regarding child testimony and violent crimes. The final panel consisted of 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from 28 to 67. 3 were parents of young children, which Morrison viewed as advantageous, while Foster had managed to seat 2 jurors who had expressed skepticism about the reliability of very young witnesses. As the afternoon wore on, Emma's support team conducted final preparations. Dr. Kim reviewed calming techniques they had practiced: deep breathing, visualization of safe places, and the special phrase Emma could say if she needed a break: "Sunshine needs water." Detective Martinez checked the security arrangements one final time, ensuring that Webb would never be close enough to Emma to cause additional trauma. "Tomorrow morning, sweetheart," Dr. Kim said gently, "you're going to help the judge and jury understand what happened to you. You're very brave, and everyone here is proud of you for being willing to tell your story." Emma looked up with eyes that held both determination and fear. "Will the bad man be there?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Dr. Kim answered honestly, "but he can't hurt you anymore. Detective Sarah arrested him, and now it's time for the judge to decide his punishment. You're going to help make sure he can never hurt another little girl." As the sun set over Phoenix, the courthouse emptied except for security guards and cleaning crews. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation 6 months in the making: a 3-year-old girl facing the man who had stolen her innocence, with only her newfound voice, and the courage of a survivor standing between justice and a predator's freedom. The morning sun cast long shadows through the courthouse windows as Emma Rodriguez entered Courtroom 3A, her tiny hand gripping Detective Sarah Martinez's fingers with surprising strength. The normally bustling courtroom had been transformed into a more intimate setting, unnecessary chairs removed, harsh fluorescent lights dimmed, and a small child-sized chair positioned at the witness stand with a bright yellow booster seat that would allow Emma to see over the wooden railing. Sunshine walked beside them on a specialized therapy harness, her golden coat freshly brushed and her therapy vest clearly identifying her role. The golden retriever had been Emma's constant companion for months, and her calm presence seemed to transfer directly to the anxious child. Emma wore the blue dress her grandmother had sewn, with tiny unicorn buttons that caught the morning light, transforming her into a picture of innocence about to confront absolute evil. The gallery was packed, despite the restricted access. Maria and Carlos Rodriguez sat in the front row directly behind the prosecution table, their faces etched with a mixture of pride and terror as they watched their daughter approach the most difficult moment of her young life. Behind them sat Grandmother Rosa, clutching her rosary and whispering prayers in Spanish. Detective Sarah had chosen to sit where Emma could see her clearly, providing a familiar anchor in the sea of unfamiliar faces. Nathan Webb sat at the defense table. His transformation from the disheveled predator arrested 6 months earlier was startling. Clean-shaven, wearing a conservative navy suit, and with his hair neatly trimmed, he looked like any suburban father attending a PTA meeting. Defense attorney Margaret Foster had orchestrated this makeover precisely to humanize her client and create doubt about his capacity for the monstrous acts described in the indictment. Judge Patricia Chun called the court to order, her voice gentle but authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are about to hear testimony from a very young witness. I want to remind everyone that this courtroom will maintain absolute silence and respect during these proceedings. Any disruption will result in immediate removal from this courtroom. District Attorney James Morrison approached Emma slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, consulting with child psychology experts to develop an approach that would allow Emma to tell her story without re-traumatizing her. "Good morning, Emma," Morrison said softly, crouching to her eye level. "Can you tell us your name?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, but the courtroom's enhanced audio system carried her words clearly. "Emma Sofia Rodriguez." "How old?" "Are you, Emma?" 3.5, she replied, holding up 3 small fingers and then half of another, a gesture that brought tears to several jurors' eyes. Morrison established basic facts about Emma's family, her home, her favorite activities, painting her as a normal, happy child before her world was shattered. Emma's responses grew stronger as she spoke about familiar topics: her brother Miguel, her grandmother's cooking, her beloved stuffed animals. "Emma, I want you to look around this room," Morrison continued gently. "Do you see your mama and papa?" Emma's face lit up as she spotted her parents. "Mama, Papa," she said, waving enthusiastically. The moment of innocent joy provided a stark contrast to what everyone knew was coming. "Emma, do you remember a day when you were playing on your swing set and something scary happened?" The change in Emma's demeanor was immediate and heartbreaking. Her shoulders tensed, her grip on Sunshine's fur tightened, and her voice became smaller. The bad man took Emma away from Mama. Margaret Foster rose from her chair. "Objection, Your Honor," leading the witness. "Sustained," Judge Chun ruled. "Mr. Morrison, please rephrase." Morrison nodded. "Emma, can you tell us what happened that day when you were playing outside?" Emma's testimony unfolded in fragments, her 3-year-old vocabulary struggling to convey the horror she had experienced. She described the dark place where she was kept, the scary smells, being hungry and thirsty. Sunshine remained perfectly still beside her, occasionally nudging Emma's hand when the child's distress became visible. "Emma," Morrison said, approaching. "The most crucial moment. I need you to be very brave now. Can you look around this room and tell me if you see the person who took you to the dark place?" The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. Emma's dark eyes began a slow scan of the room, moving past the jury box, past the gallery filled with spectators, toward the defense table where Nathan Webb sat motionless. Webb, for his part, stared straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact with his victim. His hands were clasped tightly on the table, his knuckles white with tension. Foster had coached him extensively on courtroom demeanor, knowing that any sign of aggression or intimidation toward Emma would be devastating to their defense. Emma's gaze lingered on Webb's table, her expression growing more serious. The recognition was subtle, but unmistakable, a slight widening of her eyes, a nearly imperceptible recoil. Dr. Rachel Kim, watching from the gallery, could see the child's fight-or-flight response beginning to activate. "Take your time, sweetheart," Morrison encouraged softly. "There's no rush." Emma's small finger began to rise, trembling slightly as it moved through the air. The courtroom held its collective breath as her hand extended toward the defense table. Webb's attorney placed a protective hand on his shoulder, but his eyes remained fixed straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the child whose life he had shattered. "Him," Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "The bad man who hurt Emma." Her finger pointed directly at Nathan Webb with unwavering certainty. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, broken only by Maria Rodriguez's muffled sob and the scratch of the court reporter's fingers flying across her keyboard. Morrison felt a surge of triumph, but he knew the most critical moment was yet to come. Emma had identified her abductor, but could her testimony withstand the aggressive cross-examination that Margaret Foster was undoubtedly preparing to unleash? "Thank you, Emma," Morrison said gently. "You've been very brave. I have no further questions." Judge Chung looked toward the defense table. "Ms. Foster, your witness." The real test was about to begin. Margaret Foster rose from the defense table like a predator sensing weakness, her silver hair gleaming under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. She had built her reputation on dismantling prosecution cases, and she approached Emma Rodriguez with the calculated precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. The packed courtroom held its collective breath as the most feared defense attorney in Arizona prepared to cross-examine a 3-year-old child. "Good morning, Emma," Foster began, her voice deceptively warm. "You seem like a very smart little girl. Do you know the difference between telling the truth and telling a story?" Emma's grip on Sunshine's fur tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Truth is real. Stories are pretend." Foster nodded approvingly, moving closer to the witness stand. "That's right. Now, Emma, you've been talking to a lot of grown-ups about what happened to you, haven't you? Doctors, police officers, therapists?" "Yes," Emma replied, glancing toward Detective Sarah Martinez for reassurance. "And these grown-ups have asked you the same questions many, many times, haven't they?" Foster's tone remained gentle, but District Attorney Morrison could see where this was heading. She was attempting to plant seeds of doubt about Emma's testimony being coached or contaminated. "Sometimes," Emma admitted. Foster pressed forward. "Emma, when you pointed to my client just now, are you sure you're remembering what actually happened, or are you remembering what the grown-ups told you happened?" Morrison shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative and beyond the scope of a 3-year-old's understanding." "Sustained," Judge Patricia Chun ruled firmly. "Ms. Foster, please rephrase your questions in age-appropriate language." But Foster had accomplished her goal. She had introduced doubt into the minds of the jurors. She continued her assault with surgical precision, questioning Emma about the darkness of the storage unit, the trauma she had endured, whether she could really see clearly during her captivity. Emma's confidence began to waver under the relentless questioning. Her voice grew smaller, her answers less certain. Dr. Rachel Kim watched from the gallery, recognizing the signs of a child being re-traumatized in real time. Emma's breathing became shallow, her eyes darted frantically around the courtroom, and she began to rock slightly in her chair, classic symptoms of an anxiety attack. Emma, Foster continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge, isn't it possible that you're confused? That the man who took you and the man sitting at that table are two different people? The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Emma's eyes filled with tears. Sunshine immediately stood and placed her head on Emma's lap, sensing her distress. Judge Chun called for order, but the damage seemed done. Foster had successfully shaken a 3-year-old's testimony. Then something extraordinary happened. Nathan Webb, who had maintained perfect composure throughout the trial, made a critical error. Perhaps it was frustration at Foster's inability to completely discredit Emma, or maybe it was arrogance, but he turned slightly in his chair and looked directly at Emma for the first time since the trial began. The moment their eyes met, Emma's entire demeanor changed. The trembling child vanished, replaced by a fierce determination that shocked everyone in the courtroom. Her voice, which had been wavering under Foster's assault, suddenly became crystal clear and unwavering. "That's him," Emma declared, pointing directly at Webb with renewed conviction. "The bad man who hurt Emma in the dark place." But she wasn't finished. In a moment that would be replayed on news stations around the world, Emma stood up from her chair, Sunshine by her side, and spoke with the moral clarity that only a child possesses. "Bad man hurt Emma," she said, her words cutting through the courtroom silence like a knife. "Bad man made Emma cry. Bad man is mean and scary, and he should go away forever so he can't hurt other little girls." The impact was devastating. Webb visibly flinched, his carefully maintained facade cracking for the first time. Several jurors wiped away tears, and even Judge Chun had to pause to compose herself. Foster attempted to object, but her words were lost in the power of a child's unshakable truth. Webb's reaction sealed his fate. In that moment of eye contact, his mask had slipped, revealing the predator beneath the suburban father costume. The jury had seen it, the gallery had witnessed it, and most importantly, Emma had reclaimed her power. Morrison wisely chose not to redirect. Emma's final statement needed no amplification or clarification. He simply said, "No further questions, Your Honor." The trial continued for 3 more days with expert testimony, forensic evidence, and character witnesses. But the outcome had been determined in that moment when Emma Rodriguez faced her abductor and refused to be intimidated. Her two simple words, "bad man," had carried more weight than volumes of legal arguments. The jury deliberated for only 97 minutes, the shortest deliberation in a major felony case in Arizona history. When they returned to the courtroom, Foreman Robert Chun, no relation to the judge, stood with the verdict in his trembling hands. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant Nathan Webb guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted in cheers and sobs. Maria Rodriguez collapsed into her husband's arms while Emma, who had been coloring in a special room during deliberations, was brought in to hear the verdict. When Dr. Kim explained that the bad man would be going to prison forever and could never hurt another child, Emma's response was characteristically direct. "Good," she said simply. "Bad men should be in timeout forever." 6 weeks later, Judge Chun sentenced Nathan Webb to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Emma Rodriguez, now 4 years old, continued her therapy with Dr. Kim and had begun speaking about her experience with remarkable resilience. Detective Sarah Martinez received a commendation for her investigation, and Sunshine was awarded an honorary police badge for her service to the community. But perhaps the most lasting impact was the precedent Emma's case set for child witness testimony. Courts across the nation began implementing Emma protocols, comprehensive support systems for young victims, testifying against their abusers. Emma Rodriguez had not only survived her ordeal, she had transformed the justice system itself, proving that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power to speak truth and demand justice.